Perek Chaf Beis, Mishnah Beis. This Mishnah revolves around the very important principle in Hilchos Bishul, i.e., Ein Bishul Acha Bishul. That once something has been cooked, certainly for solid foods, we cannot recook it. This applies to solid foods and not to liquid. According to most liquids, even though they've been cooked, reheating them is a problem. So what does it mean, Ein Bishul Acha Bishul? For illustration purposes, imagine the following. Thursday, a person would cook some lokshen, some noodles to place in his soup for Shabbos. So he would cook the lokshen, he would add the noodles to the pot which has hot water in it, and you cook them until they're cooked. And then you would take them out and you'd leave them in the fridge until the next night, until Friday night, to add to your chicken soup. So you've got cooked noodles, cooked lokshen. And then on Friday night, your pot of chicken soup is cooking on the stove. And then you want to add some noodles, some lokshen, to the chicken soup. So you can't add it, of course, to the pot whilst it's on the fire, because that gives the appearance that you're cooking on Shabbos. You can never add anything to a pot which is on the fire, directly on the fire on Shabbos. So you remove it from the fire and you place it on the side and you're about to serve it, but you want to pour the lokshen, let's say, into the pot of chicken soup. That is mutter, that is allowed. Why? Because of the principle of Ein Bishul Acha Bishul. Once this pasta, this lokshen, has been cooked, you can't recook it again. It's cooked already. So therefore, Ein Bishul Acha Bishul, you can add it directly to the chicken soup. No problem. Even though, now this pot has got a status of a kli rishon, i.e., it's a primary vessel, it's a keli which has been in direct contact with the heat source itself, albeit it's removed from the heat now, it's not on the fire anymore, but it retains din of a kli rishon, and it can still cook whilst the contents is hot. Mashein kain, in contrast, when you've taken the soup from the pot and you've poured it into the bowl, then the ladle might be considered a kli sheni. It depends how long it's in the pot for. And then the soup that is in the bowl has got a din of a kli shlishi, which doesn't cook anymore according to almost all poskim. Now, when it comes to, for example, an urn, would be a kli rishon. And when you were to pour from an urn into a cup, that cup has a din of a kli sheni. And if you would use that cup and to pour into a second cup, that cup has a din of a kli shlishi. And it's good practice to use, in some cases it's essential, and in some cases it's not essential, but it's good practice to use the kli shlishi on Shabbos, i.e. to always have this dedicated kli sheni, a mug, underneath the urn on Shabbos, and to pour from there into a mug, be it for coffee or for other things, even though Moshe says for coffee, that the coffee themselves is being pre-cooked, but with choshesh maybe some of the granules haven't been pre-cooked, and therefore Moshe says for himself, his machmir, to always use a kli shlishi. Now, that is the background to this Mishnah. Let's read the Mishnah. Kol sheba b'chamin me'erev Shabbos. Anything that was put in hot water before Shabbos, i.e., explain the Mefarshim, says the Batanurish and his Bashel, we're dealing with a dry food which is cooked, then shorin oso b'chamin b'Shabbos. You're allowed to soak it in hot water on Shabbos, i.e., you can soak it in a kli rishon on Shabbos. So that is the example would be the lokshen in the chicken soup. It was pre-cooked, it was dry, and therefore you can you can soak it in hot water or chicken soup or whatever on Shabbos. If it wasn't cooked before Shabbos, for example, you've got some raw meat which in emergencies could be eaten, there you can't soak it in a kli rishon because you'll be cooking it. But what you can do is you can rinse, or you can pour chamin, warm water, over it on Shabbos. Now here we're talking about warm water from a kli sheni, which is the second keli, which we described before. You cannot pour from a kli rishon, because the kli rishon would still cook it. But you can pour from a kli sheni, because that's not going to cook it. The only thing a kli sheni would pour, if you pour from a kli sheni, i.e. you've got your urn, and you pour into a mug, and then you want to pour from the kli sheni onto something, it's not going to cook anymore. The only things it will cook are things called kale habishul, which means things which are very, very easily cooked. And the Mishnah gives examples. Chutz, you cannot pour from a kli sheni onto moliach hayoshan, which means very old salted fish. V'dogim meluchim ktanim, or very small fish like herrings, where you don't actually cook them, you just add warm water to it and they're ready to eat. V'kulias hoispanin, which is the article translated as a Spanish mackerel. The Bartanura says, aspanin dag shekliposo daka, it's got very thin skin. Shvahadachosu bechamin hugba b'shulei. Because the actual rinsing of it through with adding hot water, others learn even cold water, that completes its preparation, that is its bishul. And therefore, by pouring from a klisheni onto these types of kali habishul, these types of fish, then that you are doing bishul in that process. Now, the Mishnah doesn't list another kali habishul. My understanding is that tea leaves is also considered a kali habishul. And therefore, pouring from a klisheni onto tea leaves is also problematic on Shabbos. That's why it's much preferred to use tea granules, or the Mishnah Berurah, there's a long Mishnah Berurah explaining how to make tea on Shabbos, to make tea essence. It's a long process. But either way, one has to be aware that making hot drinks on Shabbos, or generally bishul in the kitchen on Shabbos, is very, very halacha l'maisa. And this Mishnah is an important makar in the discussion. That is the end of Mishnah Beis.